Sports betting is only going to become more and more mainstream. But what exactly is a betting line? You've probably heard people mention things like the point spread, money line, line movement, but you don't exactly know the difference. Or maybe when it actually comes down to it, you just want to know what types of bets are out there that you may enjoy. So we're here to dive into all the basics to help you become a more engaged sports fan and potential bettor. When I'm thinking about potential sports bettors, I really think of two types of people out there. And the first, someone that just gets off of work, maybe it's after a 9 to 5, and they just want to have a beer, toss a few bucks on their favorite team, more of a social experience with their friends than anything else, where they can really rally around the specific end result of a game, or maybe it's just something they planned on watching anyways. And that's totally okay, by the way, just to have fun with this whole thing. But also, there's people on the other side of the spectrum, right? People that take sports a little bit more seriously, and they want to take their hobby and maybe make it into something a little bit more profitable if they're willing to put in the work and do the right things on the back end. So maybe it's possible that you fall somewhere in between and you're just here looking to learn a little bit more. Either way, sports betting is essentially the act of wagering on the outcome of a live sporting event. These events, all major sports, football, basketball, hockey, soccer, MMA, whatever it is. There's a ton of niche sports out there like darts, table tennis, esports, obviously booming right now. So it's pretty wild. Some of the sports books will even offer the ability to wager on a non-sporting event like the Oscars. Let's start with something super basic. What exactly is a betting line? Because rarely in sports are two teams perfectly evenly matched on the field. One team often far better than the other. Those are called favorites. And while the other team is considered the underdog because maybe they're in trouble before the puck is even dropped, before the game is even starting. So there's two main ways that odds makers look to create kind of a level playing field between uneven teams. And the first is called the point spread. It's most commonly found in football and basketball wagering, and the point spread essentially assigns a number to both the favorite and the underdog. It's probably a little bit easier to describe with a specific example. So let's talk about the Super Bowl last year. The Kansas City Chiefs were considered slight favorites over the San Francisco 49ers. As a result, the sportsbook set that spread at 1.5 points. The resulting betting line looked a little bit like this. So the Kansas City Chiefs minus 1.5 versus the San Francisco 49ers. That means if you bet on the Chiefs on the spread, they would need to win by at least 2 points in order for you to win that bet. If they only won by 1 point or lost the game outright, your bet would be a loser. On the other hand, a sports bet on the 49ers, if they win the game outright or just lost by a single point, you still win your bet. So that's the benefit of betting on the underdogs. You get a little bit more room for error there because they don't actually need to win the game on the field in order for you to win. So the spread in that game didn't matter much because it was small, but it can be vital in other contests. What you'll see most often in the NFL are spreads of 3, 4, and 7 points because those are the ones that coincide with some of the most common scoring differentials in NFL games in particular. But that said, the spread can get even larger in games where there are huge mismatch situations, occasionally even 60 points in certain college football contests out there. If a game ends exactly on the point spread, maybe a 3-point favorite wins by exactly 3 points, this is considered a push. So the bet is graded as no action, which means your original wager is returned to you regardless of whether you bet on the underdog or the favorite. The second way odds makers look to create a level playing field between two uneven teams is through the money line. The money line is the most common form of betting in other sports, but it is available in football and basketball as well. The money line looks to kind of address some of the inequalities between two teams by placing different odds on the favorite and the underdog. So what you'll have to do is you'll bet more money on the favorite if you want to win that same amount than if you were to put money on the underdog, if that makes sense. Let's circle back to the Super Bowl example quickly. And if you wanted to put $100 on the money line in that scenario, the Chiefs were favored in that game, so their money line odds were around minus 120. Minus 120 simply means that you have to risk $120 if you want to win $100. And on the other side, there's obviously going to be a little bit of extra incentive for betting on the underdog because if you believe that they can win the game outright, there's potentially a larger payout on the winning side of that bet. That said, there's no safety net if you're betting on the underdog like there is on the spread. So if on the money line your team loses the game, you lose the bet no matter what. There's no point spread to potentially save you, which is why you're rewarded a little bit with a little bit of extra money if they do win that game in terms of your payout. Now that we've walked through a few examples, you're probably asking yourself where these numbers even come from and how a betting line is even created. And it's a pretty involved process, obviously, but there's two key factors that I want to touch on today. The first is that the initial lines are created using the odds maker's power rating. So each team is essentially assigned a baseline number that reflects how much better or worse they are than the average team. And the second way that they do these lines is things like home field advantage. It's certainly something that will be reflected in NFL betting lines in particular. Just for example, teams that are typically on the road and it's an even playing field will be at about +3 points. So that means that they're giving the home team about 3 points for that advantage. In the NBA, it can vary significantly more. Teams with an excellent home court advantage like the Utah Jazz, Denver Nuggets can get a boost of more than 4 points, while other teams might get as little as 2. So we'll dig a little bit deeper into this topic very soon, but the main takeaway here is that setting a betting line is more of an art than a science in a lot of ways, and there's some additional factors that have been taken into account as well, things like public perception, injuries, weather, and previous head-to-head matchups that can impact that spread. Another key topic to address here is when to bet, because lines are constantly moving, so you want to make sure you're getting the best number available. It's absolutely vital to being a successful sports bettor long term. So if people talk about beating the number, it's a pretty simple concept. Essentially, you want to make sure that you are getting closing line value whenever possible. So for example, let's say you bet a 3-point NFL favorite early in the week and they end up closing as 4-point favorites before kickoff. In that case, you would have beat the number to the tune of 1 point of closing line value. And that may not sound like a lot, but consistently beating the number is a good way to ensure profitability over the long term. Plenty of professional sports bettors care about beating the number more than actually winning the bet, because that means that their long-term process is sound. Another reason why bet timing is so important is because it opens up the possibility of something called middling. So let's say you grab a team as a 3-point favorite early in the week, but that number is actually increased to 6 right before game time. You've done a great job. You've already beat that closing number, but you have an interesting proposition here because of how much you've beaten it by. You can choose to write out your current bet, which is a fine situation, obviously, a ton of value, or you can shoot for a middle. Basically, what that means is that you would now target the underdog at +6, even though you initially bet on the favorite. So worst case scenario is that one of those bets will lose and the other will win. So you will only lose the juice on one of those wagers, if that makes sense. But on the other hand, there's actually a possibility that you can win both of those wagers at the same time because of how much that line has moved. You can actually get both when it's all said and done. Let's wrap things up today by talking about the types of bets available. Now, we already have a video discussing futures bets in more detail, so be sure and check that one out later. But the most common type of bet we're going to talk about on a day-to-day basis is just going to be straight bets, where we're focusing on a single game. Straight bets can be placed on the spread, the money line, even the over-under. And we haven't talked about over-under yet, but it's basically a bet on the total number of points or runs scored in a particular game versus just wagering on a side like we've been discussing. So let's keep it simple if we're going to talk about parlays, because again, we have another full video about parlays here, so be sure and check that out on the channel. Essentially, a parlay provides bettors with an opportunity to increase the payout on their bet. Instead of just wagering on one game, a parlay allows you to combine bets on multiple games or events. The next type of bet is called a teaser, and it works very similarly to what we just talked about with parlays, but it does have some distinct differences as well. It's a bet that features multiple teams, and you're going to need to win each individual bet in order to win your teaser. But the main difference between a parlay and a teaser is that it includes a few additional points of spread value, but unfortunately, those points are going to cost you. Just as an example, a 3-team NFL teaser with each team getting 7 points is approximately -150. So betting $100 would net you a profit of just $66.70. Betting on sides, totals, sometimes it just isn't for everyone. And honestly, I think that's where prop bets can come in and be a lot of fun. They allow you to wager on specific events within the game. They're available in most sports. So just as an example, you can wager on whether or not you think a quarterback will eclipse a certain number of passing yards, maybe how many strikeouts you think a pitcher is going to rack up, or whether or not a basketball player will record a triple-double. There's tons of different props available, and if you're new to betting and come from more of a fantasy sports background, prop bets can be just a seamless transition if you're looking to dip your toe into betting for the first time. If you enjoyed this video, be sure and smash that like button and consider subscribing to the channel if you're new. You're not going to want to miss these videos right here, but don't forget to hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything else along the way. Check out all of our sports betting content over at linemovement.com and across social media at line_movement. I'll see you guys next time.